All right, welcome everybody. Welcome back to the Here Are the Steps We Took beginners meetings. And my name is Rosemary and I'll be your leader for tonight. And before we begin, we are going to start with the Serenity Prayer. And so I'm going to change this view. All right, after a moment of silence, we will do the Serenity Prayer. God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change, the courage to change the things I can, and the wisdom to know the difference. And my name is Rosemary, and I'm leading these meetings in hopes that it aids my recovery. Hopefully, it aids your recovery. It's not any specific group, not associated with Alcoholics Anonymous or Al Anon or any other group, but they are based on the early Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, and so that's what we are. That's what we are using is the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. So we'll begin with talking a little bit about the history. We talked a little bit about this last week, and that video is on the YouTube channel, Dive Deep with the 12 Steps. In the 1940s, when Alcoholics Anonymous had an estimated 75% recovery rate, it was due largely in part to the 4 one-hour beginners classes. The only tools the early members had to recover were the simple kit of spiritual tools outlined in the big book Alcoholics Anonymous. When a sponsor brought a new prospect to Alcoholics Anonymous in those early years, he was taken to the 4 one-hour beginners meetings. At these meetings, the newcomer was shown the program of recovery, was taught how to work all 12 steps of our program, and had a spiritual awakening as the result. From there, he began to work with others and started to bring new prospects to the beginners meetings to help them to recover from alcoholism. Maybe if we can bring the program in the big book to the fellowship, as the early members did, we too can have a 75% recovery rate. And remember, we're talking about recovery across the board, whatever it is that you're working a spiritual program around. Let's briefly review what we covered last week during session 1. We covered material in the doctor's opinion in the big book and the first 3 chapters of the big book. We learned about the physical, mental, and spiritual aspects of alcoholism. When it comes to drinking alcohol, once we start, we can't stop, and once we stop, we can't stay stopped. We go through the stages of a drinking spree and cannot always predict how much we are going to drink once we start. We become remorseful and we vow never to do that again. Sometimes we're able to stop for a period of time, but we're not able to stay stopped. At certain times, we are not able to recall the pain, suffering, and remorse caused by drinking, and we once again fall victim to the baffling feature of alcoholism, the utter inability to leave it alone no matter how great the necessity or want. Part of the problem was that we weren't comfortable dealing with life without using alcohol as a crutch. Our body was killing our mind, and our mind was killing our body. So we discovered that in addition to our bodies being ill, our minds were sickened as well. This cycle is repeated time and time again, unless we can have what Dr. Silkworth refers to as an entire psychic change. AA calls this change a spiritual awakening. So we concluded that if we can't drink safely because of the physical allergy, and we can't quit because of the mental obsession and spiritual malady, then we must be powerless over alcohol. Because of this, we learned that we had to fully concede to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics, Al-Anons, gamblers, overeaters, controllers, whatever you want to talk about. This is what you translate these words into your specific reason for being here. And this is the first step in recovery. From the information that we read last week, we were able to conclude that we were alcoholic and our lives had become unmanageable. With the material we covered today, we will be able to conclude that probably no human power could have relieved our alcoholism, and God could and would if he were sought. Last week, as a group, many of us took step 1 together. If there's someone here tonight that was not here last week or did not get a chance to take the first step with us, we'll give you an opportunity to do so in a few minutes. Before I go any further, I would just like to remind you that this session will run about an hour, and this session tonight is gonna be steps 2 and 3 and the beginning of step 4. And The emphasis on the words that I try to emphasize there, it's in the script. It's not me. Nothing is really me until I give you just a couple of examples of some of the steps. But for the most part, everything is just right out of the script. So let's see. We are about to take our second journey back to the early days of Alcoholics Anonymous, back to the 5 beginners meetings. As a group, we are taking the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous as the steps were taken in the mid 1940s. During this session, we will provide the information for the conclusions necessary for taking steps 2 and 3, as well as provide you with guidelines for beginning the 4th step. During the next week, each newcomer and those working on the steps with us will be expected to begin writing the resentment portion of their 4th step inventory. That information will be emailed to you, and it'll also be attached to the video on the website, on the YouTube website. Welcome to session number 2 of Here Are the Steps We Took, Beginners Meetings. Together we are taking the 12 steps based on the directions found in the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous and the personal experiences of our AA pioneers. I'm grateful for this opportunity to participate in my own recovery by leading these sessions. This is one way that we can be of service, Flossie and I can be of service to others, and at the same time grow in the fellowship of the Spirit. The goal is to recover from the seemingly hopeless state of mind and body known as alcoholism, or alcoholism, the family disease. The August 1946 AA Grapevine contains an article titled, Minneapolis Record Indicates that 75% are successful in AA. The article demonstrates what can happen when newcomers attend these beginners meetings, work the steps out of the Big Book, and then return to help others through the steps. If you attend these beginners meetings and do all that it says for us to do in the program portion of the Big Book, you will experience the miracle of recovery from alcoholism and alcoholism, the family disease. Many older members have told us the best way to understand the Big Book is to try to explain it to someone else. And they were right. We didn't realize how little we knew about our text for recovery until we started leading these meetings and working with others. So we want to thank you for providing us the opportunity to learn more about our spiritual program of recovery by once again helping others to go through the steps of Alcoholics Anonymous. And as we have learned right here in these beginners meetings, each time we take the steps, we grow spiritually. By way of a review of last week, let me describe what the Big Book says about step 1 and what the differences are between the experience of an alcoholic and that of a non-alcoholic. The book says that these differences are physical, mental, and spiritual. If you did not attend session 1 of these beginners classes last week, please pay close attention to this review and ask yourself what more closely describes your experiences with alcohol, that of an alcoholic or that of a non-alcoholic. Physically, the difference is that the alcoholic has an allergy or an abnormal reaction to alcohol. This abnormal reaction to alcohol is a craving for more alcohol once we take a few drinks. This craving never happens to a non-alcoholic. Because of this, a non-alcoholic can always predict how much they are going to drink, but an alcoholic cannot. Besides the craving, alcohol does something for the alcoholic that it does not do for the non-alcoholic. When an alcoholic drinks, they get a feeling of ease and comfort, and in control, get up and go into town. I like this kind of feeling. When a non-alcoholic drinks, they get an out of control, beginning of a nauseating, slightly tipsy, I don't like this, so I don't want any more kind of a feeling. That's why they stop after 1 or 2 drinks and make statements like, I don't want another drink because I'm feeling that first one. Spiritually, the difference is that because of the selfish and self-centered way the alcoholic views and deals with other people, their emotions, and life, they are filled with inner turmoil, discomfort, and anxiety. This spiritual malady or spiritual illness, which is the result of being spiritually blocked off by self-centered fear, exists for us as long as we are not seeking and growing toward a spiritual solution, whether we are drinking or not. One of the best references to this condition can be found in the chapter We Agnostics, where it describes the inner unmanageability as having trouble with personal relationships, not being able to control their emotional natures, being a prey to misery and depression, not being able to make a living, which includes not being able to make a successful life, having a feeling of uselessness, being full of fear, being unhappy, and not seeming to be of real help to other people. The Big Book gives us other descriptions of the inner condition that occurs if an alcoholic does not deal with this spiritual malady. But page 52 probably covers it best. Since alcohol is the only thing that the alcoholic has experienced, which brings relief from this inner unmanageability, we turn to alcohol again and again, even though it has caused problems for us in the past. We don't see what alcohol is doing to us. We only think about what it is going to do for us, which describes the difference mentally, and it is called the alcoholic's mental obsession. The non-alcoholic's relationship with alcohol is a take it or leave it kind of relationship. But an alcoholic's relationship with alcohol is a I need it to deal with life kind of relationship. Again, please ask yourself if you can relate to the experience of an alcoholic. And it's also the idea of controlling. When we're talking about somebody that's in Al-Anon, other programs, you just make that translation for yourself. So before we begin, I just want to remind everybody, people that are taking the steps with us, is to have somebody that sponsors them through the steps. If you want to work with your sponsor, hopefully you have a sponsor. If not, hopefully you can call Flossie, you can call me, somebody to work with, somebody on this meeting if you know each other, somebody that you want to work with, just to have somebody to help go through these steps with. And is anybody here for the second session that did not have the opportunity to take the first step with us last week and would like to do so now? If so, would you just please raise your hand? Anybody that wasn't here last week that wants to do it? Julie? Julie does. Okay. All right. This is going to be like a thumbs up kind of thing. And it's a great review anyway. After hearing the review we just did and asking yourself if you can relate to the experience of the alcoholic, there are two questions related to taking step one. Do you have no reservations or lingering ideas that one day you will be unaffected by drinking alcohol? And do you concede or admit to your innermost self that you are alcoholic? Please answer yes or no. You don't have to do it, on the screen if you want to or not, or you do. Thank you. And that, we've all done step one now, which is pretty cool. So after hearing the review and then answering these two questions, you have now caught up to the rest of the group and have completed step one. If you are not here for session one, please be sure to get that video that's on the YouTube video and listen to it and get the handouts that are connected to it. As was explained last week, the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous contains step-by-step directions on how to recover from alcoholism by finding a power greater than ourselves. This power will eliminate our obsession to drink and lead us to a new freedom and a new happiness and a way of life that is incredibly more wonderful as time passes, which that's a pretty big promise, you guys. Last week, we completed the first step in the AA program of recovery and conceded or admitted to our innermost selves that we were alcoholics or Al-Anons or whatever it is that we're here for. And we stated that we have no reservations or lingering ideas that one day we will be unaffected by drinking alcohol or the other behaviors that have brought us to these 12-step programs. So please turn in your big book to page 44. And now let's take a look at step two. Step two, came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. The chapter We Agnostics, which begins on page 44, starts with a good review of step one. In the preceding chapters, you have learned something of alcoholism. We hope we have made clear the distinction between the alcoholic and the non-alcoholic. If, when you honestly want to, you find you cannot quit entirely, or if when drinking you have little control over the amount you take, you are probably alcoholic. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. Let me repeat that last part. If that be the case, you may be suffering from an illness which only a spiritual experience will conquer. And that's trying to control whatever it is, the behavior or the drug or drink or whatever, food, whatever, the reason that you're here. So it says alcohol, but like I keep saying, you just translate for yourself. Now we know what we have to do in order to recover from alcoholism. We must undergo a life-changing spiritual transformation. We realize that this is not the answer many of you expected to find in Alcoholics Anonymous, but please keep in mind that alcoholism is a fatal progressive illness. Prior to AA, most alcoholics either died drunk or were locked up in jails or insane asylums. In the middle of page 44, the authors once again tell us our options. To one who feels he is an atheist or agnostic, such an experience seems impossible. But to continue as he is means disaster, especially if he is an alcoholic of the hopeless variety. To be doomed to an alcoholic death or to live on a spiritual basis are not always easy alternatives to face. So again, they are giving the only two alternatives we have if we are an alcoholic or Al-Anon: either a lot of booze, a lot of control, or a lot of God. Not only is a spiritual experience possible, it is a guarantee, provided you keep an open mind and take the steps as described in the Big Book. It continues to tell us in the next paragraph on page 44 that no matter what our present beliefs are, there is hope for us. The book continues. But it isn't so difficult. About half our original fellowship were of exactly that type. At first, some of us tried to avoid the issue, hoping against hope we were not true alcoholics. But after a while, we had to face the fact that we must find a spiritual basis of life, or else. Perhaps it is going to be that way with you. But cheer up. Something like half of us thought we were atheists or agnostics. Our experience shows that you need not be disconcerted, which means troubled. We find it amazing that the newcomer can start the AA program without any specific beliefs, or for that matter, without any beliefs whatsoever. All a person needs is the open-mindedness and the willingness to believe that we believe that this program works. And let us assure you, we do believe. The 12 steps have changed our lives and the lives of millions of other alcoholics and Al-Anons. This program will change your life too, if you honestly want to recover from this deadly affliction and are willing to go to any lengths. Now that we have admitted that we are alcoholics and that we can never safely drink alcohol, let's look at what we have to do in order to recover. And at the bottom of page 44, we learn, if a mere code of morals or a better philosophy of life were sufficient to overcome alcoholism, many of us would have recovered long ago. But we found that such codes and philosophies did not save us, no matter how hard we tried. We could wish to be moral, we could wish to be philosophically comforted. In fact, we could wish these things with all our might, but the needed power wasn't there. Our human resources, as marshaled or directed by the will, were not sufficient. They failed utterly. So that last line is saying that our human resources, which is the only thing that we have going for us, as directed by our self-will, has not worked in the past. It's not enough, and will continue to fail us when it comes to combating our alcoholism. The book continues. Lack of power. That was our dilemma. We had to find a power by which we could live, and it had to be a power greater than ourselves. Obviously, but where and how were we to find this power? Well, that's exactly what this book is about. Its main object is to enable you to find a power greater than yourself which will solve your problem. Notice that it does not say that this power is going to help us solve our problem, but this power greater than ourselves will solve our problem. The book continues. That means we have written a book which we believe to be a spiritual as well as we believe to be spiritual as well as moral. And it means, of course, that we are going to talk about God. Please turn to page 570 in the third edition Big Book, or to 568 in the fourth edition. This is the second page of the Spiritual Experience Appendix in the back of the book. What is it going to take for us to find this higher power? The answer is mentioned in Appendix 2. In paragraph 3 on page 570 in the third edition, or 568 in the fourth edition, we find these words. Most emphatically, we wish to say that any alcoholic capable of honestly facing his problems in the light of our experience can recover, provided, or if, he does not close his mind to all spiritual concepts. He can only be defeated by an attitude of intolerance or belligerent denial. We find that no one need have difficulty with the spirituality of the program. Willingness, honesty, and open-mindedness are the essentials of recovery, but these are indispensable. The Big Book authors tell us it is our arrogance and our short-sightedness that keeps us in the darkness and blocks us from the sunlight of the Spirit, which is the only thing that can help us. And so those are some of the different ways they talk about higher power. Sunlight of the Spirit is one of them. Please turn back to page 46. The Big Book authors ask us to develop our own concept of God. In other words, they want us to find a God of our own understanding. In the second paragraph on page 46, it says the following. Much to our relief, we discovered we did not need to consider another's conception of God. Our own conception, however inadequate, was sufficient to make the approach and to effect a contact with him. As soon as we admitted the possible existence of a creative intelligence, a spirit of the universe, underlying the totality of things, we began to be possessed of a new sense of power and direction, provided, or if, we took other simple steps. We found that God does not make too hard terms with those who seek him. To us, the realm of spirit is broad, roomy, all inclusive, never exclusive or forbidding to those who earnestly seek. It is open, we believe, to all. They inform us that we are going to take some actions which will lead us to our Creator, and this higher power will guide us in the realm of the Spirit. Our personalities will change from self centered to God centered. Our lives will change from the material to the spiritual. As we said earlier, AA is not a religious program. We're free to call this power anything we wish, as long as we are not it, and it is a power greater than ourselves. The Big Book authors use many different names for this power, including creative intelligence, universal mind, spirit of the universe, creator, the great reality, and an unsuspected inner resource, among others. Quite a few times they call this power God, but they use the word God merely for convenience rather than for any religious purpose. Please refer to this power by any name you believe in or feel comfortable with. Bill Wilson, our New York City co-founder, had a great deal of difficulty accepting the spiritual solution to alcoholism. In Bill's story, he describes how he came to believe. In late November 1934, Ebby T. visits Bill at his Brooklyn, New York home. It is during this visit that Bill first learns about a God of his own understanding. Let's pick up the story at the top of page 12. As we mentioned earlier, Ebby is one of Bill's school friends. Ebby has been sober in the Oxford group for several months. He tells Bill his life has changed as a result of practicing the Oxford group's 6 spiritual activities that we discussed last week. Please keep in mind that Bill always considered Ebby to be a worse drunk than he was, so the fact that Ebby was not now drinking carried a strong message. Bill becomes quite distressed when Ebby starts talking about God. However, he does listen because he realizes Ebby's life has changed and Ebby is sober for the first time in many years. Page 12, paragraph 1. Despite the living example of my friend, there remained in me vestiges or traces of my old prejudice. The word God still aroused a certain antipathy, which means a strong dislike. When the thought was expressed that there might be a God personal to me, this feeling was intensified. I didn't like the idea. I could go for such conceptions as creative intelligence, universal mind, or spirit of nature, but I resisted the thought of a czar of the heavens, however loving his sway might be. I have since talked with scores of men who felt the same way. Then, Ebby presents Bill with a revolutionary concept. My friend suggested what then seemed a novel or new idea. He said, "Why don't you choose your own conception of God?" That statement hit me hard. It melted the icy intellectual mountain in whose shadow I had lived and shivered many years. I stood in the sunlight at last. It was only a matter of being willing to believe in a power greater than myself. Nothing more was required of me to make my beginning. I saw that growth could start from that point. Upon a foundation of complete willingness, I might build what I saw in my friend. Would I have it? Of course I would. This is how Bill started on his journey to a God of his understanding and lasting sobriety. It all began with Bill's willingness to believe in a God of his own understanding. Now let's look at how the Big Book authors describe God. In the middle of page 46, they ask us to set aside our contempt for spiritual practice principles and consider our own concept of God. If we do, we will begin to realize there just might be some validity to the AA spiritual solution for alcoholism. Starting with line 3 in the first paragraph of page 46, they write, "We found that as soon as we were able to lay aside prejudices and express even a willingness to believe in a power greater than ourselves, we commence to get results, even though it was impossible for any of us to fully define or comprehend that power which is God." Basically, the Big Book authors tell us it's impossible to define God. We have to stop trying to comprehend God with our mind and start accepting God with our heart. The book continues at the top of page 47. When, therefore, we speak to you of God, we mean your own conception of God. This applies to other spiritual expressions which you find in this book. Do not let any prejudice you may have against spiritual terms deter or prevent you from honestly asking yourself what they mean to you. At the start, this was all we needed to commence spiritual growth, to effect our first conscious relation with God as we understood Him. Afterward, we found ourselves accepting many things which then seemed entirely out of reach. That was growth, but if we wished to grow, we had to begin somewhere. So we used our own conception, however limited it was. On the next page, page 48, the Big Book authors state that most of us eventually become teachable. Sometimes we have to take our lives right to the brink of disaster and look death squarely in the eye before we are willing to acknowledge the presence of a higher power. But there is hope even for the most stubborn of us. Starting with the 7th line down from the top of page 48, it says, faced with alcoholic destruction, we soon become as open-minded on spiritual matters as we had tried to be on other questions. In this respect, alcohol was a great persuader. It finally beat us into a state of reasonableness. Sometimes this was a tedious process. We hope no one else will be prejudiced for as long as some of us were. In the 3rd paragraph on page 52, the authors make a powerful case for the existence of God. Page 52, paragraph 3. When we saw others solve their problems by a simple reliance upon the spirit of the universe, we had to stop doubting the power of God. Our ideas did not work, but the God idea did. So, in order to recover from alcoholism, we have to find a power greater than ourselves. But where are we going to find this power? Please turn to page 55, and starting with the 2nd paragraph, the authors provide us with the answer to that question. On page 55, paragraph 2, it says, actually, we were fooling ourselves, for deep down in every man, woman, and child is the fundamental idea of God. It may be obscured or made unclear by calamity, by pomp, which means pride, by worship of other things, but in some form or other it is there. For faith in a power greater than ourselves and miraculous demonstrations of the power in human lives are facts as old as man himself. We saw that faith in some kind of God was part of our makeup, just as much as the feeling we have for a friend. Sometimes we had to search fearlessly, but he was there. He was as much a fact as we were. We found the great reality deep down within us. In the last analysis, it is only there that he may be found. It was so with us. We can only clear the ground a bit. If our testimony helps sweep away prejudice, enables you to think honestly, encourages you to search diligently within yourself, then, if you wish, you can join us on the broad highway. With this attitude, you cannot fail. The consciousness of your belief is sure to come to you. These are dramatic and, for some of us, revolutionary concepts. Let us summarize them for you. First, the authors of the Big Book tell us they have found a way to free us from the bondage of alcoholism and misery. Next, they describe the solution as a power greater than ourselves. Finally, they tell us where to find this power, right inside each and every one of us. Now we know where to find this power. Most of the rest of the Big Book is devoted to the question of how to find and connect with this power. Once again, we need to make a decision. We have to decide whether or not we believe in a higher power, a spirit of the universe, a God of our understanding. Just like step 1, the Big Book on page 47 provides a question associated with taking step 2. In the middle of page 47, the Big Book author writes, we need to ask ourselves but one short question. Do I now believe, or am I even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than myself? As soon as a man can say that he does believe or is willing to believe, we emphatically or strongly assure him that he is on his way. It has been repeatedly proven among us that upon this simple cornerstone, a wonderfully effective spiritual structure can be built. Now it's time to choose. Are we willing to admit that there is a higher power? If we are, we're ready to take step 2. If you are hesitant to commit right now, that's fine. It just means you're not ready to proceed with the rest of the program. Please take your time during the next week to discuss the concept of a God of your understanding with your sponsor or spiritual advisor. If after that you are then ready to proceed, have that person take you through the second step and ask you to answer the second step question found in the middle of page 47, where we find the directions. All right, let's see who is ready to proceed. This is the second step question. Do you now believe, or are you even willing to believe, that there is a power greater than yourself? And like we did last week, if you want to just do a thumbs up or electronically or not, then we can say answer to step 2. Everybody want to answer that? Some people aren't on camera. This is helpful to be on camera for this part, you guys, in case you're not on camera. Okay. Well, we don't know if the other guys are, yes, yes, good. Okay, yes, yes, good. Thank you. All right. We'll we'll leave the other ones to wonder. So, so those of you who have answered yes to this step 2 question have completed the second step. Ta-da! It's pretty good stuff. So now let's look at step 3. Please turn in your big book to page 60. Step 3. Made a decision to turn our will and our lives over to the care of God as we understood him. If the writer of a textbook has an understanding of a word, but the reader of the book has a different understanding of the same word, then the information that comes through will be garbled and incomplete. There are 3 words in the lampshade on the wall version of step 3 that are important to understand. Most people think that the third step says that we turn our will and our life over to the care of God, but it doesn't say that. What it says is that we make a decision to turn my will and life over to the care of God. So the first word that needs to be understood is the word decision, which is defined as making up one's own mind. Let's say my car breaks down. Although the decision to get my car fixed is a vital and crucial step, that decision alone does not get the car fixed. I will also need to take the actions necessary to get it fixed. For any decision to mean anything, it always requires further action. If we decide or make up our own mind to turn our will and our life over to the care of God as we understand God, that decision alone will not turn it over. We will have to take the actions necessary to turn it over. The first 3 steps are designed to bring us to the point where we become willing to turn our will and our lives over to the care of a higher power. Steps 4 through 9 are how we turn our will and our life over by removing the blocks that prevent us from actually doing so. And the last 3 steps are how we keep our will and our lives turned over to God indefinitely. After a period of time, though, our ego or self-will begins to reassert itself again. And because of our humanness, we fall short in maintaining perfect spiritual focus in all of our thoughts and activities. That is why, even if we have worked the first 9 steps to the best of our ability once, and are living in steps 10, 11, and 12, we will still need to eventually go back to step 1 and begin the step cycle again and again for deeper awakenings and further growth in other areas where we have God blocked off that we may not even be currently aware of. That's why I love going through the steps over and over. People say, oh, I've done them once. And it's like, you're going to miss a deeper awakening and further growth in other areas. That's pretty good stuff. The other 2 words that are important to understand are the words will and lives. The words will and lives are concepts way over our head and are way too large to relate to or comprehend. But these words can be better understood by explaining that our will is our thinking and what motivates us, and that our life is all the actions we've taken up to this moment. That explanation makes the words a little more down to earth and easier to comprehend. So the third step can then be reworded as saying that I decide to take the actions necessary to turn my motivations, my thinking, and my actions over to the care of God as I understand him or don't understand him. Also, what motivates me drives my thinking, and my thinking directs my actions. So I need to go deeper than just acting my way into right thinking. If my motivation and thinking is God directed, I will make the right decisions, whether it seems that way at the time or not. Then the actions taken will also be right. But if my motivation and thinking is self-directed, I will usually make the wrong decisions, even though I may not realize it at the time. Then the actions taken will probably also be wrong. The third step in the big book begins just below the middle of page 60. How do we know that? Well, in this case, the big book authors tell us being convinced we were at step 3. Convinced of what? If we've taken steps 1 and 2, we are convinced that we are alcoholics and that a power greater than ourselves can restore us to sanity. Sometimes the word sanity is misunderstood. Other words that capture the essence of what is being said here are restore us to reality, or restore us to honesty, or restore us to peace of mind, or restore us to balance, whichever you prefer. Now we need to get out of the way and let God direct our lives. On pages 60 through 63, the big book authors discuss self-will and God's will in great detail. At the bottom of page 60, paragraph 4, they explain we are like actors trying to control every detail of a play. The first requirement, and please note that it says requirement, not suggestion, is that we be convinced that any life run on self-will can hardly be a success. On that basis, we are almost always in collision with something or somebody, even though our motives are good. Most people try to live by self-propulsion, and not just alcoholics, but most people. Each person is forever trying to arrange the lights, the ballet, the scenery, and the rest of the players in his own way. If his arrangements would only stay put, if only people would do as he wished, the show would be great. Everybody, including himself, would be pleased. Life would be wonderful. In trying to make these arrangements, our actor may sometimes be quite virtuous. He may be kind, considerate, patient, generous, even modest and self-sacrificing. On the other hand, he may be mean, egotistical, selfish, and dishonest. But as with most humans, he is more likely to have varied traits. What usually happens? The show doesn't come off very well. He begins to think life doesn't treat him right. He decides to exert himself more. He becomes on the next occasion still more demanding or gracious, as the case may be. Still, the play does not suit him. Admitting he may be somewhat at fault, he is sure that other people are more to blame. He becomes angry, indignant, self-pitying. What is his basic trouble? Is he not really a self-seeker even when trying to be kind? Is he not a victim of the delusion that he can wrest, which means take away by force? Wrest satisfaction and happiness out of this world if only he manages or manipulates well? Is it not evident to all the rest of the players that these are the things he wants? And do not his actions make each of them wish to retaliate, snatching all they can get out of the show? Is he not, even in his best moments, a producer of confusion rather than harmony? Does anybody here not relate to this page? I don't know if you're here. Can't imagine that you wouldn't. So we seem to be always trying to prove to everyone else that they would be better off if they just did things our way. I'm sure you'll agree that that's a bit of self-centeredness and a form of playing God. I think the word that comes to mind is manipulation, but you can call it whatever you want. In the first paragraph on page 62, the authors declare that it is this selfish and self-centeredness that has gotten us into trouble. We need to take responsibility for our selfishness and ask God to remove this shortcoming from our lives. Page 62, paragraph 1. Sorry, I'm still doing allergy stuff here. Self-centeredness, selfishness and self-centeredness. That we think is the root of our troubles. And I always thought that alcohol or other people were my problem, but it says, driven by 100 forms of fear, self-delusion, self-seeking, and self-pity, we step on the toes of our fellows and they retaliate. Sometimes they hurt us, seemingly without provocation, but we invariably, which means constantly, find that at some time in the past we have made decisions based on self which later placed us in a position to be hurt. So our troubles, we think, are basically of our own making. This brings a message of hope because it's neither necessary nor possible to change others. But if we, with God's help, can change ourselves, we will find that no other changes are needed. If other people or life were to blame for our troubles, there's absolutely nothing that we can do about that. But if I am to blame for almost all of my troubles, there is something I can do about that because I am the only person that I can change. Like a wise man once said, it is easier to put on a pair of slippers than to carpet the whole world. The book continues. They arise out of ourselves, and the alcoholic is an extreme example of self-will run riot, though he usually doesn't think so. It's important to know that this includes before we started drinking, while we were drinking, and even prior to taking step 3 since we've stopped drinking. Above everything, we alcoholics must be rid of this selfishness. Please notice that it says above everything and must. We must, or it kills us. God makes that possible, and there often seems no way of entirely getting rid of self without his aid. Neither could we reduce our self-centeredness much by wishing or trying on our own power. We had to have God's help. So it's saying that the only thing that we have going for us, which is self-will and self-knowledge, or my life run on my will, is the very thing that will lead us back to drinking at best, or progressive misery as time passes at worst. Let me repeat that. It's saying that the only thing that we have going for us, which is self-will or my life run on my will, is the very thing that leads us back to drinking and or progressive misery. If we are trying to make ourselves unself-centered, we are still being self-centered. A self-will problem cannot be overcome by self-will. A sick mind cannot heal a sick mind. We cannot use the problem to solve the problem. That gets rid of any hope we have of not pursuing this higher power stuff. Now what? Since step one says that we are powerless over alcohol, what we need is the power with a capital P. And since our lives are unmanageable, especially our mental, emotional, spiritual life, whether we are drinking or not, what we need is a new manager with a capital M, because anything at all that God has in mind for me is better than anything at all that I will ever have in mind for me. So the AA program ultimately asks us to make two surrenders, not just one. We need to surrender to our drinking alcohol, and we do this in step one, but we also need to surrender to our self-will, or my life run on my will, and we do this in step three. Unfortunately, many members of AA only make the first surrender and inevitably do not experience all the freedom, joy, and serenity that the AA way of life promises because of not surrendering their self-will. They are often miserable and they go back to drinking. Then at the bottom of page 62, the authors tell us what we have to do in order to rid ourselves of selfishness. This is the how and why of it. First of all, we had to quit playing God. It didn't work. Next, we decided that hereafter in this drama of life, God was going to be our director. He is the principal, we are his agents. He is the Father, we are his children. Most good ideas are simple, and this concept was the keystone of the new and triumphant arch through which we pass to freedom. And for those who do not know, the keystone is the supporting stone for the entire structure. So the third step decision is the supporting step for the rest of the steps. Now, this decision is starting to sound important. The big book just stated that we need to let God become our director, so we need to be doing what we think our higher power would have us do. In other words, we need to be staying in the moment, being directed by unselfishness and love, and doing the next right thing. It also says that we need to move in the direction of being God's agent. Since an agent is given the power to represent the principle, we are deciding to start acting in a way that would represent our highest power. It then mentions being God's children, and if we are all God's children, we need to start acting as if we are all equal brothers and sisters. So you can see that this paragraph says a lot and actually contains the essence of what the third step decision is all about. The book continues, and this next paragraph contains the third step promises. When we sincerely took such a position, and the position of God being our director, our principal, and our Father, all sorts of remarkable things followed. We had a new employer, the capital E. Being all powerful, he provided what we needed if we kept close to him and performed his work well. So now we know our place in God's universe. Contrary to what we may have thought in the past, the whole world does not revolve around us. Once we step aside and put God in the center, we are amazed at how much better our lives become. In the second step, we are told we need to come up with some sort of God of our understanding, or power greater than ourselves. AA gives us a lot of respect by allowing us to believe whatever we wanted to believe about this power, but there is a little unseen footnote next to step two that states, so long as we are not it. The big book says again and again that my belief that the universe revolves around me is a big part of my problem. So this center of my universe needs to be replaced with some belief in a power greater than human power. Then in step 3, it introduces us to an important attribute that this power needs to have when it says, the care of God as we understood him. So our concept of the power now needs to include the fact that this God cares and is caring. This may be difficult for many of us because our original concept of our Creator may have been more along the lines of a judgmental, harsh, he's going to get me, something to be feared kind of God. We may need to completely scrap these old ideas and start over because this isn't the kind of higher power that one turns to for help. By now, we have moved toward becoming more aware of the presence of God. Starting with line 5 on page 63, the authors explain this awareness. There are also more third step promises. Established on such a footing, we become less and less interested in ourselves, our little plans and designs. More and more, we became interested in seeing what we could contribute to life. As we felt new power flow in, as we enjoyed peace of mind, as we discovered we could face life successfully, as we became conscious of his presence, we began to lose our fear of today, tomorrow, or the hereafter. We were reborn. We have been delivered from the gates of hell, and we have come back to tell what it was like. It isn't a pretty picture, but now we realize we never have to go back there again, as long as we don't forget to allow God to be our director. It is decision time once again. The Big Book authors tell us we are now ready to take step 3. The middle paragraph on page 63 contains the third step prayer. This prayer is an affirmation of the decision we are making at the bottom of page 62. Before we say this prayer together as a group, there are some considerations we need to look at first. About 2/3 of the way down to page 63, beginning with the last line of paragraph 2, they provide us with the directions and a warning. We thought well before taking this step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly or completely to him. We found it very desirable to take this spiritual step with an understanding person such as our wife, best friend, or spiritual advisor. But it is better to meet God alone than with one who might not understand, might misunderstand. The wording was, of course, quite optional so long as we expressed the idea, voicing it without reservation. This was only a beginning, though, if honestly and humbly made. An effect, sometimes a very great one, was felt at once. We are so fortunate that in the years since the Big Book was written, the fellowship has grown to where very few, if any, newcomers have to take the third step alone. We are here tonight to take this monumental step with you. Because it says, we thought well before taking the step, making sure we were ready, that we could at last abandon ourselves utterly or completely to God. We would like to take a moment for personal reflection for those of you taking the steps with us. Could we please have a moment of silence to think about whether or not you are ready to decide to turn your will and your life over to the care of God, of your own understanding? All right. At the bottom of page 63, we can find the last point made about step 3. The Big Book authors tell us what we need to do after we've made our third step decision. It is perhaps the most important point about the third step, yet it is rarely discussed at meetings and usually overlooked. It states, next, we launch on a course of vigorous action, the first step of which is personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Let's see, I just want to make sure I didn't miss anything here. The first step, which is a personal house cleaning, which many of us have never attempted. Though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it could have little permanent effect unless at once followed by a strenuous effort to face and to be rid of the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. Our liquor was but a symptom, so we had to get down to conditions and causes. Please note that the authors say at once. It's telling us that this third step decision will have little permanent effect unless we immediately follow it up with strenuous effort to face, and where we face these things is in steps 4, 5, and 6, and to be rid of Where we get rid of these things is step 7, 8, and 9, the things in ourselves which had been blocking us. And what we're being blocked off from is the ability to turn our will and our lives over to begin with. So after working the 6 middle steps, then and only then will we be able to turn our will and our lives over to God with any kind of consistency, or else our initial contact with the Creator, with our Creator, won't last. So let's see who's ready to proceed. And people who have worked and completed steps 1 and 2, please keep in mind, like we just said, the actions necessary to bring about step 3 decisions are steps 4 through 9 steps, because steps 4 through 9 are how we remove the blocks from turning our will and our life over to God. So this is the third step question. Do you now decide to take the actions necessary to turn your will and your life over to the care of God as you understand Him? Please answer by putting your thumbs up, or like Flossie has her little automatic, willing to take the actions to continue. Anybody? Everybody? Okay. All right. Although they say the wording is quite optional, the authors do provide us with a prayer that can be used as a daily affirmation of this third step decision. Let me read it first, and then we'll say it together as a group. We're still not going to unmute, though, you guys, so you don't show up on the recording. Let me read it first, and then we will say it together as a group. Starting with the second line in the second paragraph on page 63, it reads, God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Let's now read the third step prayer together as a group. God, I offer myself to thee, to build with me and to do with me as thou wilt. Relieve me of the bondage of self, that I may better do thy will. Take away my difficulties, that victory over them may bear witness to those I would help of thy power, thy love, and thy way of life. May I do thy will always. Please begin to include saying this third step prayer as a part of your daily time with God, and when needed throughout the day. We have now completed all the information that the Big Book authors provide for step 3. What I am about to read now has been called the step 3 parable, because it captures what we think is the essence of the third step. A drunk is staggering along the street and he meets God. God, I can't do this anymore, he says. Please, please, will you give me sobriety? God says, sobriety isn't free. How much money do you have? The drunk says, $50. I'll take it, says God. You're sober. The man stands up straight, drunk no more. It feels pretty good. Yeah, but God, yes? I know I gave you my money willingly, but you see, I need to get gas for my car. And God says, oh, you have a car? And yes, I have a car. Well, you didn't tell me that. I'll take the car. But God interrupts and says, I'll take the car. It's part of the price for your sobriety. But how will I get to work? Oh, you have a job? I'll take the job too. But God, how will I pay my mortgage? Mortgage? You have a house? I'll take that too. But God, my family, how will I take care of them if you have my house and my job? God says to him gently and lovingly, in order to keep your sobriety, you must give me these things. But I will let you drive my car as long as you remember it's my car. You can have the job, but remember you're working it for me. It's my house, but I will let you live in it. And as for the family, they are my family, but I will trust you to take care of them. So even though we have taken a considerable amount of time on the first 3 steps, all we have done is make decisions. Now we are going to begin to take some specific actions that will carry us the rest of the way to an experience of God. Step 4, made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. What are these causes and conditions mentioned at the end of the third step? Well, the Big Book authors use a lot of different words meaning the same thing. Damaged or unsaleable goods, flaws in our makeup, defects of character, shortcomings, and even wrongs. All these have the same meaning and the same effect. They block us off from God and others. The authors start by comparing a personal inventory to a business inventory. In the first full paragraph of page 64, they write, therefore, We started upon a personal inventory. This was step 4. A business which takes no regular inventory usually goes broke. Taking a commercial inventory is a fact-finding and a fact-facing process. It is an effort to discover the truth about the stock in trade. One object is to disclose damaged or unsaleable goods, to get rid of them promptly and without regret. If the owner of the business is to be successful, he cannot fool himself about values. So, we are going to conduct the equivalent of a commercial inventory on our lives. We are going to discover what has blocked us off from the sunlight of the spirit. In the next paragraph, the authors tell us exactly what we have to do to conduct a fourth step inventory. We did exactly the same thing with our lives. We took stock honestly. First, we searched out the flaws in our makeup, which caused our failure. Being convinced that self, not alcohol, but self, manifested in various ways, was what had defeated us. We considered its common manifestations. If you remember, this is a reference back to what was discussed in step 3, that self-will, or my life run on my will, is the root of our troubles. We are now going to inventory, or take stock, if you will, of 3 manifestations of self-will: our resentments, our fears, and our sex conduct and harms toward others. We have provided inventory sheets for you to do this, and we will read the clear-cut, simple directions that the Big Book authors have documented for us. Let us reassure you, the fourth step is not difficult, nor should it be a tedious process. Within 7 pages of text, the Big Book authors give us precise instructions on how to make a good beginning on facing and getting rid of the obstacles in our path to the power greater than ourselves. The first manifestation of self we're going to look at is our resentments. Since Bill Wilson liked using different words that mean the same thing, the book uses a few different expressions when describing who and what to write down. People, institutions, or principles with whom we have resentment, with whom we were angry, with whom we were hurt or threatened or interfered with whom we felt had wronged us, with whom we stayed sore at, with whom we felt burned up toward, and with whom we held a grudge. Also included in this list should be people, institutions, or principles with whom we were annoyed with, agitated by, or let down by. And also include your regrets, because regret is a resentment turned toward yourself. Needless to say, this is usually a long list. The word resentment comes from the Latin word sentire, which means to feel. And when you put re in front of any word, it means again. So the word resent means to feel again. After we experience what we perceive as being wronged by someone, the first response usually is anger or frustration. But then, after a while, after we have reviewed in our mind what happened and have felt the anger or anxiety again and again, we move to the next stage, which is resentment. Over a short period of time, as I play back the suspected harm in my head, I become less and less involved in what happened, and the other person becomes more and more to blame. Sometimes we are able to let the incident go without moving past anger, but if you are a self-centered alcoholic, that is usually a difficult thing to do, since we tend to keep score of these things so we can at some point get back at them. I'm sure nobody here can probably relate to that. Anybody? I'm gonna plug my laptop in here real quick. Since the Big Book says that step 4 at once follows step 3, we would like to briefly describe the first 3 columns of the resentment inventory so that you can start writing your fourth step when you leave here today. Next week, we will cover step 4 in its entirety. Please turn to the sheet. Please don't let that scare you guys. It's really a terrific session. Please turn to the sheet entitled Resentment Inventory on page 10 in the packet provided for you. So you won't have that in the packet tonight, but it'll get emailed to you. And it's a pretty simple one. I don't have a copy with me. Do you have a copy, Floss, with you of the fourth step, the empty one? It doesn't matter. It's you don't have it in this packet. It's just a page, and it's columns, and it goes down. And in the first column, it says let's see. You can clearly see the first row. You can't clearly see, but the first three columns of this sheet resemble the example found on page 65. Okay, so you can turn to page 65, with the exception of an added fourth column. Don't worry, the directions for the fourth column are found on page 67, and we'll be getting to that next week. So first, let's look at the simple step-by-step, column-by-column procedure the Big Book authors give us for writing the resentment inventory. 6 lines from the bottom of page 64, the authors tell us, in dealing with resentments, we set them on paper. So in this first column, I'm resentful at, it says to put the following. We listed people, institutions, or principals with whom we were angry. We continue writing the names in the first column until we are finished. And how do you know when you're finished? Well, when you think you're finished and no more names come to mind, stop, ask God for guidance. If more names come, write them down. If not, you're finished with the first column, unless you think of something later. Please note that there is a resentment inventory prompt sheet just before the resentment inventory that will give you some other ideas as well. And that's going to be in the email and/or tomorrow when I get the video posted, it'll be connected to the video also, PDF. Second column, second instruction, 3 lines up from the bottom of page 64. We asked ourselves why we were angry. In our example on page 65 and in our sheets, the second column is entitled The Cause. Why am I resentful, burned up, or sore at whatever is written in each of the boxes in the first column? What did they do to make me angry? List all the resentments you have for each name. Keep in mind you may have more than one resentment toward any one person, place, or thing. So they suggest that you say a name and then skip a couple of lines so that you have room for multiple resentments towards one person. You don't have to do a lot of writing either. It's pretty simple. You probably don't need many prompts to remember what it is that you're resentful toward. So it doesn't take a lot of writing here. In the third column, third instruction, page 64, last 3 lines. Oh, look, I have one. Last 3 lines and page 65, first 2 lines. In most cases, it was found that our self-esteem, our pocketbooks, our ambitions, our personal relationships, including sex, were hurt or threatened. In the first paragraph on page 65, the Big Book authors repeat themselves and add a few more ways self can be affected. On our grudge list, or resentment list, we set opposite each name our injuries. Was it our self-esteem, our security, our ambitions, our personal or sex relations which had been interfered with? Remember, our self-esteem is how we view ourselves. Our pocketbook is money or material possessions. Our ambitions are our plans for the future or what we wanted. And our security is our general sense of personal well-being and has 2 possible viewpoints, financial security or emotional security. Then at the bottom of the example, the bottom right of the example given on page 65, the Big Book includes the word pride. Pride can be defined as an exaggerated opinion of ourselves. That makes up the 7 ways that self can be affected in column 3. Also provided for you in the handout packet is a list of definitions for words used in the 4th step, and these definitions should be handy as you're writing this. So I'm going to give an example. This always gets me in trouble too when I do this. So here's the resentment inventory sheet, right? So it says everything that's there. I listed people, institutions, and principals with whom I am angry. I am resentful at, and then it lists that. So they tell you, and this is a super important thing to have you guys for step 4, go from top to bottom. Don't ever go across. List the names, institutions, principals. Go back and write a little note about the cause. You don't have to do a lot of writing here because ultimately in step 5, you're not going to need a lot of prompting to remember what your resentment is about, because if you've been carrying it around for a while and you've been rethinking it, you don't need to write it all out on paper. So just a little prompt. And then you check these boxes of what it affects. I maintain at least 5 boxes, if not all 7 would be checked with every single resentment on this list. And when you're willing to see it and you can talk to somebody, you can call me, ask me to help you to see it. It always shows up 5 to 7 of these. And then there's a column 3B that I talk about that says we ask God to take that other person, place, or thing out of the picture and let me see, where am I? Where had I been selfish, dishonest with myself and others, self-seeking, frightened? Where was I to blame? And that's the last column. So I'm going to give you a little bit of example here. I have a friend, Susie. I have a couple friends named Susie. This is all made up. It's between a lot of fifth steps that I've heard over the years. It's sort of a compilation, but it's kind of a good example. My friend Susie, I'm resentful of my friend Susie. Why? I have three resentments towards Susie, big ones. She stole my boyfriend, she stole my alcohol, and she stole my money. So those are the causes. I don't even have to write it out, you guys. I can write BF, a money sign, a dollar sign, and then liquor. That's all I have to write. I know what that means, so it doesn't have to take a lot of writing. And in most cases, it was found that the following was hurt, threatened, or interfered with. Self-esteem. She stole my boyfriend. Of course, my self-esteem is damaged. How could he do that to me? How could she do that to me? My pocketbook? Well, you see, my boyfriend was living with me and she was living with me. The three of us were living together at the time. And she stole my boyfriend. And now, he's not going to pay my part of the rent. He was paying my part of the rent. He was paying his part of the rent. Now he's not going to pay my part of the rent. Security. He was my boyfriend. I knew when I went out and I went out drinking that he would be with me and that I would be secure. I didn't have to worry because he'd be with me. So I could do whatever I wanted and not worry. My ambitions, I had ambitions for him. I had a plan for him. He was going to stay with me. He was going to help me with my money. He was going to take care of me. He was going to keep me safe. And now, gone because she stole him. Pride. Of course, my pride is hurt. Of course, my pride is affected. How could they do this to me? How could she do this to me? I thought we were friends. Personal relationships. Yeah, absolutely. My relationship is completely damaged with her, severed, in fact, which is tough because now we're all living together. Sex relationships, not really a problem anymore because I don't have it. So it's gone. So that's my problem with my sex relations. It affects everything. She stole my money. Same thing. Self-esteem, pocketbook, security. I had that money for security. My ambitions, I had plans for that money. I was going to buy alcohol with that money, whatever it was I was going to do. My pride, my personal relations, I can't go out anymore. I can't do things because I don't have the money. So my personal relationships are affected. Sex relations, absolutely. They're affected in all sorts of different ways. She stole my alcohol. I have my alcohol is my self-esteem in a bottle. So my self-esteem is definitely affected. My pocketbook, I have to replace the alcohol. My security in the bottle, my ambitions. I had plans for that alcohol. I need it to be able to get through the day. My pride, how could she do this to me? Doesn't she know? Doesn't she know who I am? How could she do this to me? My personal relationships, my sexual relationships, everything. Everything is affected. And this is one of the things that I see when I find out about resentments. Like, I didn't think about how me carrying around a resentment affects so much of my life. And it affects my relationships so much. It just never occurred to me. Of course, because I'm selfish and self-seeking, I'm not thinking about anybody else. And so I think that it's just going to talk about only do the first three columns. So it's only asking you to work on the first three columns, and it's not a full fourth step, you guys. That's what this is so cool about this whole program, this whole session, is that it's only asking you to just take a couple of examples to run it through the steps to see how these steps work. You don't have to do your whole fourth step, but it just starts to show you how it works. And you could take a couple that, even at the end, you might be able, you might want to even talk about them a little bit to see how they worked for you, but we're only going to take a couple. Now, if you're going to really be doing a fourth step, it talks about printing out like 8 to 10 pages and just do a fourth step. And if this is what's going to get you to do a fourth step, that's perfect. Go ahead and do it. But for here, we're only going to be using a couple of examples. So it's asking you to do the first three columns here. So it says, please pay attention to what I'm about to read. For those of you who are working the steps with us, this is what is expected of you over the next week. Please start saying, and I just want to point to this resentment inventory page because this is in the packet that you'll get. It's a pretty good list right there. Resentment inventory prompt sheet. Here's a list of people, institutions, and principles. Father, mother, sister, brothers, grandmothers, best friends, acquaintances, Bible thumpers, girlfriends, boyfriends. Institutions, marriage, church, religion, races, government, education system, hospitals, nationality, rehabs. Principles, IRS. Principles, God or any deity, Bible, retribution, 10 Commandments, Satan, death, life after death, 7 deadly sins, 12 steps, 12 traditions, can't be too thin, love thy neighbor, don't put off until tomorrow, old guiding sayings. All sorts of stuff will come up. That's a great prompt sheet. So Please start saying the third step prayer each morning and when needed throughout the day. Please make copies of each of the 3 inventories provided in your packet so that you will have blank forms to write on. Now, there's also the fear inventory that's in the, I'm holding it up to the camera. The fear inventory is in here and the sex and harms inventory is in the packet. And again, these are attached to the video in the drop-down box in the description down below. What is suggested is to make 10 copies of the resentment inventory, 5 copies of the fear inventory, 10 copies of the sex and harms inventory. As you are writing, please start saying the 4th step prayer found at the bottom of page 8 in your handout packet and finish only the first 3 columns of your resentment inventory, 1 column at a time, top to bottom, before going on to the next column. Please make this a priority and try to do some writing every day. I say 15 minutes. And just come up with a couple of examples. It doesn't take much. I say 15 minutes to go through your whole 4th step. When I work with somebody, I tell them just 15 minutes a day. Set that timer. Do not do more than 15 minutes because your head will tell you the next day, if you do more, oh, I don't have time to do that. And then I'm not going to do it. I'm going to get discouraged. And so if I do 15 minutes a day, I could do 5 minutes in the morning, 5 in the afternoon, 5 at night. It doesn't matter. But just make the attempt to sit and do it and be willing. And as you're writing, say the 4th step prayer, when you are completely finished with the 3rd column, please begin to pray the step 4 resentment prayer at the bottom of page 8 in your handout packet for the people, institutions, or principles that you wrote down in the 1st column of your resentment inventory. And that's what I call column 3B, which I ask God to take out the other person and let me see my part in this. Let me see where I'm to blame. Please remember to talk with your sponsor or temporary sponsor or one of us, after the meeting, or swap phone numbers if necessary, and get to know each other so that you can assist each other with your 4th step. If you want to put your phone numbers in the chat, then Flossie can grab them and pass them around if you're willing to have your number passed around. And it's only for this group, and so please respect people's anonymity regarding that. We wish you the very best as you leave here to complete the first 3 columns of your resentment inventory. Please remember to bring this week's handout packet with you to the next session so that we can continue with the inventories provided. And this is the end of session 2. And the thing is that these inventories are in this week's packet, and there's no packets for next week because this is everything you need for this week and next week to start. So if you want, and so that's the end of tonight. So we're going to stop the recording and hope that you come back next week. It's amazing how many people drop off around step 4.